Captain Jake Morrison opened his eyes to darkness. The cold metal walls of his sleep pod hummed softly as systems came online. 300 years had passed since humanity chose to sleep, but to Jake it felt like yesterday. He pushed the lid open and stepped out onto the deck of the UES Nightfall. The ship drifted silent through space, one of thousands of human vessels that had been sleeping for centuries. Jake was one of the few who took turns staying awake to watch over his species while they rested. The observation deck showed him the galaxy beyond. Stars burned bright in the void, but Jake knew that around those distant suns, terrible things were happening. He walked to the sensor station and activated the long-range scanners. Data flowed across the screens, telling him stories of worlds far away. The Zephyrian Empire had grown stronger while humans slept. Their massive ships moved from system to system, taking what they wanted. Entire species served them as slaves now. The insectoid hive collective had spread across the outer rim like a disease, consuming everything in their path. The crystalline Veltar stripped whole planets bare, leaving nothing but empty rock behind. Jake had watched this happen for 30 years of his rotation. Each time he woke up, the galaxy had gotten worse. Each time, he recorded what he saw and went back to sleep, knowing another human would take his place. He moved to the communications array and listened to signals from across the galaxy. Most species had forgotten humans existed. They called them myths now, stories told to scare children. But some remembered. Some still whispered about the silent giants who once walked among the stars. On the forest world of Kepler 442b, the Sylvan, people still sang songs about humans. Jake had heard their transmissions before. They remembered how humans had shared art and poetry with them long ago. They remembered kindness when the rest of the galaxy had forgotten what the word meant. But their songs were getting sadder. The Zephyrian Empire was coming for them. Everyone knew it. The Sylvans were too weak to fight back, too peaceful to even try. They would die, and no one would stop it. Jake pulled up the records of first contact with the Sylvans. It had been 400 years ago, when humans still walked freely through the galaxy. The tree-like aliens had welcomed human explorers with gifts of living art, sculptures that grew and changed over time. They had learned human languages just to write poetry for their new friends. Now they were going to die, and Jake could only watch. He checked the status of other human ships. 10,000 vessels drifted in the Terran exclusion zone, the area of space that other species feared to enter. Some ships held sleeping colonists from the old human worlds. Others carried soldiers who had fought in wars the galaxy had forgotten. All of them waited for someone to decide it was time to wake up. The decision was not Jake's to make. That power belonged to the command ship, UES Leviathan, and Admiral Kate Sullivan. She had been humanity's guardian for 40 years, making sure no one disturbed their rest. Jake had never met her, but he knew her reputation. She was the one who had convinced humanity to withdraw from galactic affairs in the first place. Jake accessed the ship's historical records. He read about the great withdrawal, when humans had grown tired of playing policeman to a galaxy that seemed determined to destroy itself. They had tried for centuries to bring peace to the stars. They had stopped wars, freed slaves, and protected the weak. But for every problem they solved, 10 more appeared. So they had left. Not in anger, but in sorrow. They had pulled back to their home systems and gone to sleep, hoping the galaxy would learn to be better without them watching. The galaxy had not learned. Jake looked at the latest intelligence reports. The Zephyrian Empire was preparing for what they called the Great Harvest. They planned to sweep through the galaxy, destroying any species they considered useless. Billions would die, maybe trillions, and humans slept on. Jake walked to the ship's memorial hall, where holographic displays showed the faces of every human who had died trying to bring peace to the galaxy. Soldiers, diplomats, scientists, explorers. All of them had believed the galaxy could be saved. All of them had been wrong, or maybe they had been right, and humans had just given up too soon. The communication array chimed. A new message was coming, in from the Sylvan homeworld. Jake activated the translator and listened as Elder Thornweave spoke in her people's musical language. Children of Earth, the translation read, "We know you sleep, and we do not wish to disturb your rest. The burning, ships come for us soon. We do not ask you to save us. We are not worthy of such sacrifice. We ask only that you remember us when we are gone. Remember that once, there was beauty in this galaxy. Remember that some of us tried to be good." Jake stared at the message for a long time. He thought about the poetry the Sylvans had written for humans. He thought about their living art, growing wild in forests that would soon burn. He thought about a galaxy that had forgotten how to be kind. Then he did something he had never done before. He opened a direct channel to the UES Leviathan. "Admiral Sullivan," he said into the void, "you need to see this." Admiral Kate Sullivan had been awake for 3 days straight when Jake Morrison's message reached her. She stood on the bridge of the UES Leviathan, the largest ship humanity had ever built, watching sensor data flow across dozens of screens. The data told her everything she needed to know about the galaxy's current state, and none of it was good. Kate was 67 years old, but the sleep cycles had kept her body young. She had been humanity's guardian for 4 decades, making the hard choices that kept her species safe. She had watched civilizations rise and fall while humans slept. She had seen wars that killed billions and said nothing. She had kept the promise humanity made when they withdrew from the galaxy. But Jake's message changed everything. She played the Sylvan transmission again, listening to Elder Thornweave's words. The tree-like aliens had always been different from the others. They created beauty instead of weapons. They wrote poetry instead of war songs. They had been humanity's friends when friendship meant something. Dr. Ben Carter stood beside her, reviewing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. He was humanity's expert on alien cultures, the man who had predicted how each species would develop while humans slept. His predictions had been right about everything except one thing. He had believed the galaxy would grow peaceful without human interference. "The Zephyrian Empire has mobilized 12,000 ships," Ben said, his voice quiet. "They're calling it the Great Harvest. They plan to eliminate what they call inefficient species. The Sylvans are first on their list." Kate nodded. She had been tracking Zephyrian movements for months. The Empire had grown bold during humanity's absence. They commanded a quarter of the galaxy now, ruling through fear and brutality. Their ships were primitive compared to human technology, but they had numbers and ruthlessness. "How long do the Sylvans have?" she asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The Zephyrian forward fleet is already in their system. They're just waiting for the main force to arrive before they begin the cleansing. Kate walked to the tactical display that showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Zephyrian positions. Blue dots showed human ships, all of them dark and drifting, in the exclusion zone. Green dots marked species that still maintained some form of civilization. There were far fewer green dots than there had been 3 centuries ago. "Show me the Sylvan system," she said. The display zoomed in on Kepler 442. The forest world hung in space like a green jewel, surrounded by Zephyrian warships. More ships arrived every hour, dark metal insects gathering around something beautiful they planned to destroy. Kate had been to the Sylvan homeworld once long ago. She remembered walking through forests where the trees themselves were living art, their branches shaped by generations of careful tending. She remembered Sylvan poets reciting verses in perfect human languages they had learned just to honor their friends from Earth. "Admiral," Ben said carefully, "the Sylvan message wasn't sent to us alone. They broadcast it on all frequencies. Every species in the galaxy heard Elder Thornweave's words." Kate understood. The Sylvans had made their message public, not to shame humanity into action, but to say goodbye to a galaxy that was about to forget them. It was typical of their people. Even facing extinction, they chose grace over anger. She pulled up historical records of human-Sylvan relations. First contact had been peaceful, which was rare. Most species met humans with suspicion or fear. The Sylvans had welcomed them with gifts and songs. They had shared their art freely, asking for nothing in return except friendship. When humans began their withdrawal from galactic affairs, the Sylvans had been among the few who understood. They had blessed humanity's decision to seek peace through isolation. They had promised to remember their human friends fondly, and hoped to see them again someday when the galaxy had learned wisdom. That day had never come. Kate activated the ship's internal communications system. Her voice echoed through the corridors of the Leviathan, reaching every section of the massive vessel. "This is Admiral Sullivan. All senior staff report to the bridge immediately. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." Within minutes, the bridge filled with people. Commander Ryan Blake, Kate's second-in-command, stood at attention beside the weapons station. Dr. Lisa Hayes, the ship's lead scientist, took her position at the research console. Major Sam Torres, head of security, waited by the tactical display. These were the people who had helped Kate watch over humanity for decades. They had made the same sacrifice she had, staying awake while their species slept. They had seen the galaxy grow darker and said nothing, bound by their duty to keep humanity safe. Kate played the Sylvan message for all of them. The bridge fell silent as Elder Thornweave's words filled the air. When it ended, no one spoke for a long moment. "The Sylvans remember us," Kate said finally. "They remember the friendship we shared before we chose to sleep. They're not asking us to save them. They're too noble for that. They're asking us to remember them when they're gone." "Commander," Blake stepped forward. "Admiral, our orders are clear. Humanity withdrew from galactic affairs for good reason. We tried to police the galaxy for centuries, and it didn't work. Every time we solved one problem, 10 more appeared." "Ryan's right," Dr. Hayes added. "We calculated the cost of intervention. The galaxy has to learn on its own, or it will never truly change." Kate nodded. She had heard these arguments before. She had made them herself when humanity first chose to withdraw. The logic was sound. The galaxy needed to grow up without human parents watching over it, but logic felt cold when she thought about Sylvan forests burning. "Major Torres," she said, "what's the status of our defensive systems?" Sam Torres consulted his tablet. "All automated defenses are operating normally. The exclusion zone perimeter is secure. Any ship that tries to enter human space without authorization will be destroyed. And our offensive capabilities? The fleet has been upgrading itself during the sleep period. We have 10,000 ships fully operational, with capabilities far beyond anything that existed when we went dark. Each vessel could handle 100 enemy ships without difficulty." Kate looked at the tactical display again. 10,000 human ships against 12,000 Zephyrian vessels. The numbers looked close until you considered the technological gap. Human ships had been improving themselves for 3 centuries. Zephyrian technology had barely advanced at all. "Dr. Hayes," Kate said, "run a simulation. If we intervene to protect the Sylvans, what are the likely consequences?" Lisa Hayes worked at her console for several minutes. Probability matrices flowed across her screen as the ship's computers modeled thousands of possible outcomes. "The immediate result would be Zephyrian defeat," she said. "Their entire fleet would be destroyed in hours. But the long-term consequences are more complex. Other species would react with fear. Some might unite against us, others might become dependent on our protection. The same problems we faced before we withdrew," Commander Blake said. Kate stared at the display showing the Sylvan system. More Zephyrian ships had arrived while they talked. The forest world looked smaller now, surrounded by so much metal and hate. She thought about the promise humanity had made when they chose to sleep. They had promised to stay out of galactic affairs. They had promised to let other species find their own way, even if that way led to darkness. But they had also promised something else, long ago. They had promised to protect the innocent and stand against those who would destroy beauty in the universe. Kate made her decision. "Prepare the fleet," she said quietly. "We're going to wake them up." The bridge erupted in voices as her staff tried to change her mind. They spoke of duty and promises and the wisdom of isolation. They reminded her of all the reasons humanity had chosen to sleep. Kate listened to them all, then raised her hand for silence. 300 years ago, we withdrew because we were tired, she said. We were tired of fighting wars that seemed to solve nothing. We were tired of watching species destroy themselves despite our help. We were tired of being the galaxy's policeman. She paused, looking at each of her officers. But we were never tired of being human, and humans protect their friends. Kate turned to the communication station. Send a message to all ships in the fleet. Authorization code Omega-7. Begin awakening protocols immediately. Across the Terran exclusion zone, 10,000 ships began to stir. The awakening began on Earth first. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, automated systems that had run silently for 3 centuries suddenly came alive. Lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark since the Great Withdrawal. The planet's sleeping. Leaders began to stir as wake-up protocols activated throughout the solar system. President Alan Cross opened his eyes in his underground facility in Colorado. The last thing he remembered was saying goodbye to his family before entering stasis, trusting that humanity's long sleep would give the galaxy time to find wisdom. Now alarms were chiming softly, telling him that sleep time was over. He sat up slowly, his body adjusting to wakefulness. The chamber around him looked exactly as it had 3 centuries ago, but he could feel that something had changed. The air itself seemed to hum with energy he didn't recognize. A holographic display activated in front of him, showing Admiral Sullivan's face. She looked older than when he had last seen her, but her eyes held the same determination that had made her humanity's guardian. "Mr. President," she said, "I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation. The galaxy has not learned wisdom during our absence. In fact, it has grown worse. Much worse." Alan listened as Kate explained the current state of galactic affairs. The Zephyrian Empire's planned genocide, the Sylvan homeworld under siege, the systematic destruction of peaceful species across known space. "I've authorized the awakening of our fleet," Kate continued, "but this decision affects all of humanity. You need to know what we're facing." Alan stood and walked to the chamber's main display. It showed him Earth as it existed now, and what he saw took his breath away. The planet was surrounded by massive, orbital platforms, each one bristling with weapons that could crack moons. Shipyards stretched between Earth and Mars, construction bays filled with vessels unlike anything that had existed when humanity went to sleep. "My God," he whispered, "what have we built?" The chamber's AI answered him in a voice he didn't recognize. It was smoother than any computer he remembered, more alive somehow. During the sleep period, automated systems continued to operate under Protocol 7, the AI said. Human technology has advanced by approximately 400%. Current defensive capabilities exceed all previous projections. Alan pulled up more displays. Mars had been transformed into a fortress world, its surface covered with manufacturing plants that had been running continuously for 3 centuries. The asteroid belt was filled with mining operations and automated factories. Jupiter's moons hosted research stations that had made breakthroughs humanity couldn't have imagined before they slept. "How many ships do we have?" he asked. "Current operational fleet stands at 10,732 vessels, the AI replied. Each ship represents technology approximately 50 years ahead of what existed at the time of the Great Withdrawal. Additionally, there are defensive platforms, automated systems, and weapons that were theoretical concepts when humanity entered stasis." Alan sat down heavily. Humanity had spent 3 centuries sleeping while their machines built an empire in their absence. They had become something far more powerful than they had ever been when they were awake. On Mars, General Sam Torres was having a similar awakening. He stood in the command center of humanity's largest military base, watching displays that showed the true extent of what they had become. Fleets of ships moved through space on patrol routes he didn't remember authorizing. Defense grids protected systems he had never heard of. "Report," he said to the base AI. "General Torres, welcome back. Current military status is code green across all theaters. The Terran exclusion zone has been maintained successfully for 300 years. No unauthorized vessels have penetrated our perimeter. All fleet elements are ready for immediate deployment." Sam pulled up tactical displays of human space. What he saw was not the small collection of systems they had controlled before the withdrawal. Human influence now extended through dozens of star systems, all of them protected by automated defenses that had been improving themselves for centuries. "Show me our current capabilities," he ordered. The displays changed to show weapon systems that seemed like science fiction. Ships that could fold space around them to travel faster than any drive system he knew. Weapons that could ignite stars or create black holes. Shields that bent reality itself. "How is this possible?" he asked. During the sleep period, research continued under the guidance of advanced AI systems. Human science has made significant breakthroughs in quantum mechanics, space-time manipulation, and energy projection. These advances were incorporated into all military systems. Sam realized that humanity had not simply been sleeping for 3 centuries. They had been evolving. Dr. Claire Davidson woke up in her laboratory on Luna. The Earth hung above her, blue and beautiful, but surrounded by structures that dwarfed the moon itself. She was humanity's chief scientist, the woman who had designed many of the systems that were supposed to maintain human civilization during the sleep period. But what she saw through her lab windows was far beyond anything she had planned. "Computer, show me the research logs for the past 3 centuries, she said. Data flowed across her screens faster than she could read it, breakthrough after breakthrough, each one building on the last. AI systems that had become more sophisticated than anything humans had created before the withdrawal. Nanotechnology that could rebuild matter at the molecular level. Energy sources that tapped into the quantum foam of space itself. "We've become gods," she whispered. The computer responded, in a voice that sounded almost human. "Dr. Davidson, the term gods may be appropriate from the perspective of other galactic species. However, human values and ethics have been preserved throughout the advancement process. We remain committed to the protection of life and the pursuit of knowledge." Claire pulled up files on other species in the galaxy. The computer had been watching them all, tracking their development, cataloging their strengths and weaknesses. Humanity knew more about galactic civilization now than they ever had when they were active participants in it. "What happened while we slept?" she asked. Galactic civilization entered a period of decline approximately 150 years ago. The absence of human influence allowed aggressive species to expand unchecked. Current projections indicate complete civilizational collapse within 50 years if current trends continue. Claire stared at the data. The galaxy was dying, slowly strangled by species that had forgotten how to build instead of destroy. Back on the Leviathan, Admiral Sullivan watched as reports came in from across human space. Every awakened leader was seeing the same thing. Humanity had become something magnificent and terrible during their long sleep. Commander Blake stood beside her, reading deployment reports from the fleet. "Admiral, all ships report ready for immediate action. The fleet AIs have been running tactical simulations for centuries. They have battle plans for every possible scenario." Kate nodded. The ships themselves had been learning while their crews slept. They had studied every battle fought in the galaxy during humanity's absence. They knew the weaknesses of every enemy they might face. "Admiral," Dr. Hayes called from her station. "I'm receiving a priority transmission from the Sylvan homeworld." The main display showed Elder Thornweave standing in what looked like a burning forest. Zephyrian ships were landing in the background, and the sounds of destruction echoed through the communication link. "Children of Earth," the Elder said, her musical voice strained with sorrow. "They have come for us at last. We do not blame you for your silence. You warned the galaxy long ago that there would be consequences for choosing war over peace. We chose to ignore that warning." She paused as explosions lit the sky behind her. "We want you to know that we kept the art you gave us. The sculptures from your world still grow in our sacred groves. We will tend them until the end so that something of the friendship between our peoples survives." The transmission cut to static. Kate stared at the empty screen for a moment, then turned to her communications officer. "Signal the fleet," she said. "All ships are to proceed to the Sylvan system at maximum speed. Anyone who stands in our way will be destroyed." She paused, thinking of forests burning and poetry dying, "and send a message on all galactic frequencies. Tell them the humans are awake." Across the galaxy, Every species with the ability to monitor communications heard the same message broadcast in 1,000 languages. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Human Federation. After 3 centuries of isolation, humanity has returned to galactic affairs. We withdrew in the hope that other species would learn wisdom in our absence. Instead, you have chosen to embrace cruelty and destruction. The message continued, transmitted from relay stations that had been hidden throughout the galaxy for centuries. We will no longer permit the systematic destruction of peaceful civilizations. We will no longer allow the strong to prey upon the weak. The age of unchecked aggression is over. On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship in the Sylvan system, Admiral Kethvar laughed when he heard the human message. Humans were myths, stories told by old species who remembered ancient defeats. Even if they existed, they were just one more civilization to be harvested. He was about to learn why the galaxy had one rule above all others: don't wake the humans. The first human ship to leave the Terran exclusion zone in 3 centuries was the UES Harbinger. Captain Drew Mitchell stood on its bridge, watching the Sylvan system grow larger on his screens. The ship moved through space without any visible means of propulsion, reality bending around it as it traveled faster than light should allow. Drew had been asleep for 200 years before the awakening protocols pulled him from stasis. He remembered the old human ships, powerful but crude compared to what surrounded him now. The Harbinger was alive in ways that defied explanation. Its hull could repair itself from damage that would have destroyed entire fleets in the old days. Its weapons drew power from the quantum foam of space itself. "Captain," his tactical officer called out, "we're detecting the Zephyrian fleet. 800 ships in standard attack formation around the Sylvan homeworld." Drew nodded. 800 ships sounded impressive until you understood what humanity had become during its sleep. The Harbinger alone could have handled 10 times that number without difficulty. "Any response to our approach?" he asked. "They're demanding. We surrender, sir. Standard Zephyrian protocol. They want us to prepare for boarding and inspection." Drew almost smiled. The Zephyrians had no idea what they were facing. To them, the Harbinger probably looked like any other ship, maybe a little sleeker than most. They couldn't detect the reality-warping engines or the weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Their sensors simply weren't advanced enough. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship," Drew said. The main screen showed Admiral Kethvar, a creature that looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect. The Zephyrian wore elaborate armor covered in the bones of creatures from conquered worlds. His eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Unknown vessel," Kethvar said in heavily accented galactic standard. "You have entered a restricted system. Prepare to be boarded or face destruction." Drew looked at the alien for a moment, studying the bone decorations and remembering intelligence reports about Zephyrian brutality. Each bone represented a species they had wiped out, a civilization they had destroyed for the crime of being weak. "This is Captain Drew Mitchell of the Human Federation ship Harbinger," he said calmly. "You have 10 minutes to withdraw from this system. This is the only warning you will receive." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what Drew knew was Zephyrian laughter. "Human Federation? There are no humans in this galaxy. You are either lying or insane. Either way, you will be destroyed." The channel closed. Drew turned to his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Carter, are all Zephyrian vessels targeted?" "Yes, sir. All 800 ships are locked on. Quantum disruptors are charged and ready. Time to withdrawal deadline? 9 minutes. 30 seconds. Drew watched the tactical display as Zephyrian ships moved into attack formation. They were impressive vessels by the standards of most galactic civilizations. Massive dreadnoughts with armor thick enough to shrug off nuclear weapons. Their main guns could level cities, and they carried enough fighters to blot out the sun of a small world. Against human technology, they were less than toys. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. The Sylvans are asking if we're really human." Drew nodded. "Put it through." Elder Thornweave's face appeared on a secondary screen. She stood in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city, smoke rising behind her as Zephyrian ground forces advanced. "Children of Earth," she said, her musical voice filled with wonder. We hoped you would remember us, but we never dared believe you would come. We remember, Elder, Drew replied. We remember the poetry your people wrote for us. We remember the living art you shared. We're here to make sure it survives. Thornweave's eyes filled with tears that glowed like starlight. The young ones thought you were just legends. They will sing of this day for generations. They'll sing for many generations, Drew promised. We'll make sure of that. The withdrawal deadline passed. Drew looked at his tactical display one more time. 800 Zephyrian ships waited in perfect formation, their weapons trained on his lone vessel. It was exactly the kind of overwhelming force that had allowed them to conquer half the galaxy. Lieutenant Carter, he said quietly, you may fire when ready. The universe held its breath. What happened next changed everything. The Harbinger didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, it projected fields of altered reality that touched each Zephyrian ship simultaneously. Where the fields made contact, matter simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not blown apart, but erased at the fundamental level as if it had never been. 800 ships, vessels that had ruled star systems for decades, became nothing in the space of 17 seconds. Where moments before a mighty fleet had blocked out the stars, now there was only empty space and slowly dispersing atomic particles. Admiral Kethvar had just enough time to register what was happening, before his flagship followed the rest of his fleet into non-existence. On the planet below, Zephyrian ground, forces stopped their advance and looked up at the sky. Their fleet, their support, their way home had simply vanished. In the space of a heartbeat, they had gone from conquerors to stranded prisoners on a world they had tried to destroy. Elder Thornweave stared at the display showing empty space where the enemy fleet had been. How? She whispered. Drew's voice came through the communication link, warm and reassuring. Elder, we've had 300 years to think about the mistakes we made before we withdrew. We've had 300 years to become something better than what we were. Across the galaxy, long-range sensors detected what had happened in the Sylvan system. The destruction of 800 ships in less than 20 seconds sent shockwaves through every civilization capable of faster-than-light communication. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Zek-Thul received the news with disbelief. His greatest admiral, his most powerful fleet, gone without even managing to fire a shot. The beings responsible claimed to be human, but that was impossible. Humans were myths, stories from the old days. Send everything, he ordered his remaining admirals. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we have. Find these so-called humans and destroy them. It was the worst mistake the Zephyrian Empire would ever make. On Earth, President Alan Cross watched tactical displays showing the galaxy's reaction to the Battle of Kepler 442. Every aggressive species was mobilizing their fleets. Every peaceful civilization was sending messages of support to humanity. The galaxy was choosing sides. Dr. Davidson, he said to his science advisor, how many ships are moving against us? Claire Davidson consulted her displays. Approximately 50,000 vessels from 12 different empires. The Zephyrians are calling it the Great Crusade. They're claiming humanity threatens the natural order of the galaxy. Alan nodded. 50,000 ships sounded impressive until you compared it to what humanity could field. Their 10,000 vessels were each worth hundreds of enemy ships. General Torres, Alan said, deploy the fleet. It's time to remind the galaxy why they made that rule about not waking us. Sam Torres smiled grimly. Mr. President, it will be my pleasure. Back on the Harbinger, Captain Drew Mitchell received new orders from Admiral Sullivan. He was to proceed to the next system on the Zephyrian target list, a world inhabited by crystalline beings who created living symphonies. The enemy was already moving to attack it. Set course for the Melodian system, he ordered. Maximum speed. As the Harbinger bent space around itself and disappeared into the quantum foam, Drew thought about the old days when humanity had tried to police the galaxy. Through diplomacy and measured force, they had been gentle then, always trying to find peaceful solutions. That gentleness had been seen as weakness. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity stopped being gentle. In the depths of space, Automated beacons that had been silent for 3 centuries suddenly came online. They broadcast the same message on all frequencies in every known language. The Human Federation has returned to galactic affairs. Any species engaging in genocide, slavery, or unprovoked aggression will be stopped. Any species that continues such behavior after this warning will be eliminated. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is a statement of fact. The message repeated continuously as human ships began appearing throughout the galaxy, each one a harbinger of judgment for those who had chosen cruelty over wisdom. The galaxy had broken its most important rule. Now it would face the consequences. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, the galaxy was a different place. The Zephyrian Empire, which had ruled a quarter of known space for centuries, existed only in history books. Their homeworld was now a peaceful garden world where former slaves had built memorials to the billions who had died under Zephyrian rule. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the observation deck of the UES Leviathan, watching the reconstruction of the Sylvan homeworld below. Human engineering ships moved through the planet's atmosphere, repairing damage that had seemed permanent just months ago. Forests that had burned for weeks were green again, tended by technology that could make desert worlds bloom. The war, if it could even be called that, had lasted exactly 73 days. 50,000 enemy ships from 12 different empires had faced humanity's 10,000 vessels. The result had been so one-sided that most species now questioned whether it had been a war at all or simply a demonstration of power. Commander Ryan Blake approached with the latest reports from across the galaxy. His expression was troubled, which Kate found interesting. They had won completely, accomplished everything they had set out to do. The innocent were safe, the aggressive were defeated, and peace was spreading across the stars. Admiral, Ryan said, "We have a problem." Kate turned from the window. "What kind of problem?" "The kind we faced before the Great Withdrawal. Species are becoming dependent on us. The Crystalline Union is asking us to govern their trade disputes. The Aquatic Federation wants human peacekeepers on their border worlds. Everyone wants our protection, our technology, our guidance." Kate nodded. She had been expecting this. Overwhelming victory came with its own complications. When you proved you could protect everyone, everyone expected protection. "How many requests have we received?" she asked. 1,400 formal petitions for intervention in the past month alone. Everything from territorial disputes to requests for technological assistance. The Sylvans are asking if we can help them expand to other worlds. The Melodians want human teachers for their young. Kate walked back to the window. Below, Elder Thornweave was leading a ceremony in one of the restored forests, celebrating the return of life to their world. Sylvan children who had never known safety were playing among trees that human technology had regrown from ash. "What does President Cross want to do?" Kate asked. "He's leaving the decision to us, the military one. The political consequences are ours to handle." Kate understood. Alan Cross was a good man, but he had been asleep during the worst years of galactic history. He hadn't watched civilizations die while humans remained silent. He didn't carry the weight of all those species they could have saved but chose not to. Kate did. "Schedule a meeting with all senior commanders," she said. "It's time to decide what kind of galaxy we want to create." 2 days later, the leadership of humanity gathered in the Leviathan's main conference room. Physical presence, not holographic. Projection. Kate had insisted on that. The decisions they were about to make would affect trillions of lives. They needed to look each other in the eye while they made them. General Sam Torres spoke first. "From a military standpoint, we have complete dominance. Our technology is centuries ahead of everyone else. Our fleets can be anywhere in the galaxy within hours. We could impose any kind of order we choose." Dr. Claire Davidson nodded. "Our manufacturing capacity can provide for entire civilizations. We could end scarcity, eliminate disease, extend lifespans across hundreds of species. We have the power to create paradise. Or hell," added Dr. Ben Carter. "Absolute power corrupts absolutely. We've seen it happen to every dominant species in galactic history. The Zephyrians started as liberators too 500 years ago. Kate looked around the table at the people who had helped her make the hardest decisions in human history. They had watched their species sleep while others suffered. They had maintained isolation while genocide ravaged the stars. They had done their duty, but the cost had been enormous. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Commander Blake pulled up a holographic display showing the current state of galactic civilization. Green zones marked areas under direct human protection. Yellow zones showed regions where human peacekeepers maintained order. Red zones indicated areas where aggressive species still operated, though none dared challenge humanity directly. "We have 3 options," he said. "Complete withdrawal again, hoping the galaxy has learned its lesson. Complete control, governing every aspect of galactic civilization, or something in between." Kate studied the display. Complete withdrawal was impossible now. Too many species depended on human protection. If they left, the cycle of war and destruction would begin again within decades. Complete control was equally problematic. Humanity would become what the Zephyrians had been, imposing their will on unwilling subjects. Even with the best intentions, absolute power would eventually corrupt them. "Show me the middle option," she said. Blake changed the display. "The Protectorate system. We divide the galaxy into sectors, each one governed by a coalition of local species under human oversight. Species that prove themselves capable of peaceful coexistence gain more autonomy. Those that choose aggression face immediate intervention." Dr. Davidson leaned forward. "We would be creating a galactic government with humanity at its head. That's exactly what we tried to avoid 3 centuries ago. The difference," said Dr. Carter, "is that now we have the power to make it work. Before the withdrawal, we were strong but not overwhelming. Species could challenge us, fight us, ignore our rules. Now resistance is impossible." Kate considered this. Humanity would become the permanent guardians of galactic civilization, the ultimate authority that no one could challenge. It was a massive responsibility, one that would bind her species to the galaxy forever. "What about the people who are still sleeping?" she asked. "The colonists, the civilians, the billions who chose isolation? Do we have the right to make this decision for them?" The room fell silent. That was the heart of the matter. Humanity had chosen to withdraw from galactic affairs. A small group of guardians had made the decision to return. Did they have the authority to commit their entire species to eternal vigilance? General Torres spoke quietly. "Admiral, we've already made that choice. The moment we intervened to save the Sylvans, we committed humanity to this path. We can't save some innocents and ignore others. We can't protect some species and abandon the rest." Kate knew he was right. There was no middle ground between isolation and responsibility. They had chosen to care about the galaxy again. That choice came with consequences. "Very well," she said. "We implement the Protectorate system, but with safeguards. Human authority is limited to preventing aggression and protecting the innocent. Internal governance remains with local species. We guide, we don't rule." Over the following months, the human protectorate took shape. Species that had proven themselves peaceful became founding members with full representation in the new Galactic Council. Former aggressors were granted provisional membership, their behavior closely monitored by human observers. The Sylvan homeworld became the capital of the new order, chosen specifically because it represented everything the Protectorate was meant to preserve. Beauty, art, peaceful coexistence, the celebration of life rather than its destruction. Elder Thornweave stood with Kate in the same forest where Zephyrian soldiers had once advanced to commit genocide. Now young beings from dozens of species played together among the living sculptures, learning from each other's cultures. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake?" Kate asked the Sylvan elder. "Humanity tried this before and failed. We might fail again." Thornweave's branches rustled in what Kate had learned was their equivalent of a smile. "Child of Earth, failure is only permanent if you stop trying. Your species chose to sleep rather than become tyrants. That choice honored you then, and it honors you now." She gestured at the children playing in the forest. "Look at them. Zephyrian young and aquatic juveniles and crystalline fragments, all learning together. This is what you have made possible. Not perfection, but hope. Kate nodded. Hope was enough. It was more than the galaxy had possessed for centuries. As the years passed, the human protectorate grew stronger. Species that had spent millennia in conflict learned to cooperate. Technologies were shared freely, ending scarcity on hundreds of worlds. Art and culture flourished as civilizations no longer needed to devote all their resources to war. There were still problems. Rebellions broke out occasionally, quickly suppressed by human peacekeepers. Some species chafed under the restrictions, longing for the old days of unrestricted expansion. A few attempted to develop weapons that could challenge human supremacy. All such attempts failed. Captain Drew Mitchell, now an admiral commanding his own fleet, stood on the bridge of the Harbinger as it patrolled the outer rim. His sensors detected a group of ships trying to cross into Protectorate space without authorization. Pirates most likely, or slavers looking for easy prey. Signal them to halt for inspection, he ordered. The response was predictable. The unknown ships opened fire and tried to run. Drew almost felt sorry for them. They were probably criminals from one of the independent systems beyond Protectorate space, desperate enough to risk challenging human authority. The engagement lasted 14 seconds. When it was over, space debris marked where 6 ships had once existed. Drew MI.